prezentācija ar sapni par digitālo laikmetu. Vārds Nikijai Smedlijai, lūdzu.
Thank you very much. Let me take a minute just to organise myself, if you would. Actually, I should have just said, oh, really. Okay. All righty, so yes, that's me, that's my company, and I'd like to talk to you about some dreams. But before I do, can I just ask via your remote voting doodah thingy, who here has, for themselves personally, a kind of definite dream for the digital age? Okay, thank you very much. We might come back to that a bit later on. Okay, so I'm really happy to be invited to speak. I feel like I should be a bit taller, sorry. I'm very happy to be invited here to speak at the Educational Forum about schools in the digital age. I must confess, though, changing cultures, we are not a technology company. However, I think in any system and a technology system, then the weakest link can be the user. And this is where we have our expertise. We describe ourselves as experts in creativity and engagement, but I'd like to just delve into those phrases a little bit. By creativity, we don't necessarily mean the ability to dance or draw or play a musical instrument. It could be argued that those are, in fact, technical skills, and that the creativity comes with how you use them. And that this also could be true in various other fields, whether you're a retailer or a mathematician or whatever you are, that you need to learn the technical skill set in order to carry out the jobs. But the creativity, the success of that comes with using creativity to embed those techniques in new ways. Engagement, it's of course a key issue for businesses and for schools. You could say it was a little bit of a holy grail. But you increase levels of engagement, whether internally or externally in your organization, and a whole raft of problems will dissipate. Technology can have a part to play here in stimulating interest in learning, perhaps. But maybe you need to do more than just plonk a piece of technology in front of some children and walk away in order to have good learning. Or maybe not. You may be aware of the work of Dr. Sugata Mitra. And whilst working in New Delhi, teaching people how to write computer programs, he dug a hole in the wall that his office, through to the slum area that his office backed onto. And in this hole, he placed an internet-connected PC computer at child height and also placed a camera to view the area. The children from the slum learned how to use the computer. They learned how to go online. In order to do this, they had to teach themselves some English. And the ones who got the hang of it a little bit quicker, they then taught the others. And no adults were harmed in this experiment. He repeated this experiment in many different parts of India, and he found that the results were the same. So he started to publish his findings, which was basically that in 9 months, a bunch of children given a computer in any language would reach the same skill set as an office secretary in the West. Dr. Mitra then developed this into a further project, which he calls the School in the Cloud. And this is when a child with a computer, learning independently, anywhere in India, if they feel that they need a little extra support, they can access remotely a support granny, a volunteer ex-teacher, who will then be able to help them out and, more importantly, offer masses of encouragement. He calls it the Granny Cloud. He does have a couple of inspiring TED Talks online, and I would, if you haven't seen them already, I would urge you to have a look. I'm going to put links to all the references that I use on the Changing Cultures website, so that is changingcultures.org, so you don't need to write anything down that you might want to look at in more detail later. You can just go there and all the links will be there. So Dr. Mitra's dream is a computer for every child and the growth of what he calls souls, that's S-O-L-E-S, self-organized learning environments. And these will be enabled by only three things: broadband, peer collaboration, and encouragement. So there's his dream. His rather radical hypothesis is that in the digital age, knowledge, learning, well, not learning, but just that knowing really will be obsolete, that knowing will be obsolete, which is quite a radical thing to say and to hear, I think, the first time. But actually, it's the logical progression of what we're experiencing in our schools, and certainly what I'm experiencing in the UK, but I think it's worldwide. Back in the day when you and I and Neil and some other people here were at school and it was chalk and blackboard, then the balance was completely different. The teacher, the grown-up, had all the knowledge and bit by bit would impart it to us, the children. And it's just not so now. I'm sure that we've all been in a situation where we've needed a child's help with a piece of technology that we're not necessarily at home with. The balance has shifted, but the educational model hasn't. Now, as we know very well, a child can access a piece of information anytime, anywhere it wants, at the touch of a button. So it's no longer the adult world saying, I know more, listen to me. The power balance has shifted, if indeed knowledge is power, and the child knows that. So logically, our educational model needs to shift too. Now it can be much more about what shall we find out about today together. Because of our technological advances, we're at a hugely liberating time. And if we're brave, we can take the opportunity to make meaningful learning for children who can't access or perhaps find difficult some of the traditional methods that we're still using. Neil mentioned earlier Salman Khan and the Khan Academy, which you probably know about, but in case you don't. He started in 2004 making YouTube tutorial videos to coach his cousins in maths. And the Khan Academy has now made more than 5,000 video tutorials and has about 2 million subscribers, and it's all free. The central paradigm is that in any module, you stay where you are until you are able to answer 10 questions correctly on the row. That being the measure of you having grasped whatever concept that module is about. Then you can move on. So it's kind of self-pacing. His belief, and the research backs this up, is that when a child is able to learn at their own pace and in their own time, then the ones who find it a little bit difficult at the start will ultimately catch up and learn just as well as the children who grasp the concept easily in the first place. I think it's interesting here that actually in this case, it is the technology that is helping the learning become more humanized. And teachers have found that if they send children home with some of the Khan Academy modules to learn independently, so that's really the content that used to be delivered in the classroom, they can then come back to the classroom and learn independently in the way that they would have done at home with the homework, but the teacher is on hand to deliver some personalised support. He's also developed tools to enable teachers, parents or tutors to track the progress of the child very easily with red and green bricks. So the teacher can simply see on a chart, oh, so-and-so is struggling with fractions, and then offer some support, or better still, ask a child who has grasped the concept to go and help the child who is struggling. And through this, Khan has developed a peer-to-peer learning support system that happens remotely over the internet. His dream is a one-world classroom, or as he says in his words, a free, world-class education for anyone, anywhere. The possibilities open to us now are manifold. The Victorian model of schools, as we looked at earlier, is now unfit for purpose. It feels like a radical change is necessary, as if as a culture, our social mores are behind the technological leaps. And so we are failing very many of our children. But is it a failing of imagination, or is it a failing of guts? Changing cultures have a long-term relationship with the special school, a school for children with a huge variety of different disabilities and challenges right in the middle of England. And they have one of the gutsiest head teachers that I've ever come across. He's been in post for just under 3 years, and the school is completely rejuvenated for him being there. And his passion is personalised learning. It's very important for all of his children, but for some of his children, it's very hard to grasp. For example, for some autistic children, learning the time on a clock, like the yellow one, has absolutely no reference when telling the time on a watch, and certainly no bearing on a digital device. So they're learning, the contextualized learning is absolutely key. Consequently, in his school, there is a farm, an eBay shop, a bike shop, a cafe, and also with support, his young people run a cafe in the local town. He's put the school at the very, very heart of the community. Now, maybe so far, not so different, but this next bit is, after the age of 13, his children don't learn anything that isn't useful to them in their real life. So in his words, so just waiting to see if the translator is translating the slide. Oh, you don't have? Sorry. Okay. So he hits his targets and he gets great results. At present, the percentage of his children, and remember some of these children have very, very profound additional needs, the percentage who leave his school going into what we in the UK call NEET, which is not in education, employment or training, is 0%, and that's a huge achievement. He's totally dedicated to personalised learning. His dream is for every child in his school, that's 166 children, to have a separate curriculum. This is another of his quotes. People say to design 166 separate curricula, that's just too difficult. Well, it's not as difficult as trying to redesign the child to fit the curriculum that already exists. There's his dream. In New York City, they have a program called the School of One. It was originally piloted for the learning of maths, And their model employs an initial diagnostic system, and the pupil is given a kind of a playlist of the skills that the school thinks they should be focusing on. And in addition to this, they have a personal profile which is drawn up with the aid of parents and also of past teachers, and this changes as they move through the school system. And this helps match instructional content, mode of delivery, with the way that the child learns most effectively. The student profile and the bank of lessons available are then put through a computerized learning algorithm and given a personalized schedule for the teacher and for the student. Their dream is that the philosophy of personalized learning increases and perhaps becomes the norm. Now, I really believe in personalized learning, and I hope it's what our technology will allow us to do more easily in the future. I was speaking at the BET show in London recently, and for those of you who don't know, it's a really massive 4-day event around technology and education. And as I was walking around the exhibits and having a look at the different people selling their wares, a thought occurred to me. There were lots of companies selling personalized learning kits, I suppose. But I wonder whether or not, as I looked a little bit more deeply, really, it seemed like some of them weren't exactly personalized learning. It was more like a kind of formulaic learning. If you have a child who is like child C, then deliver program 4. Not all, but some. And I'll be perfectly honest, I haven't witnessed these systems in action, and they may be very good. But I also think it's worth being careful that we keep up with the robust pedagogy to go alongside the technological leaps and don't get carried away with it, to keep a clear head about what actually it's offering us that it can do. Don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of tech in the classroom. I'm on the side of the people who are dreaming big dreams for the digital age, but there are those who are focusing more on the nightmares. Here are some fears I've heard voiced. This one, the increase in digital engagement will grow a generation of fat, incapable children, and we're on the way to that with the obesity epidemic. Well, yes, childhood might be more isolated and sedentary than it's been in the past, but I don't think that's technology's fault. As an example, when I was working in television, I choreographed a program called Boo Bar, and that was invented with the express idea that if you had movement, dance movement on the screen that was attractive enough for the child watching, it was enticing enough for them that they would get up off the couch and join in. They would have to. They wouldn't be able to help themselves. They didn't need any adult instruction. They didn't need any instruction at all. They would just get up and join in. And it worked perfectly. And because they weren't instructed to do it, they felt it was their decision, it was their movement to do. It worked everywhere, using technology in a very positive way to get movement out of children. It's not the technology per se, of course, but I think it is crucial that we supply a huge amount of really top quality opportunities for children to explore their physicality. I agree with Ken Robinson when he rather radically says that dance should be held as a curriculum subject the same level of importance as, say, maths. Not more important, but as important. And after all, we all have bodies. We have calculators that can do maths for us, but we don't have anybody else but ourselves that's going to work our body for us. Plus, our pavements would be much better places to walk down. And then there's this concern. Teachers will just rely on technology to teach the children, and they'll become lazy and complacent. And they won't all become Cameron Diaz. Personally, I think there are easier places to become lazy and complacent if that happens to be your thing. Mostly, We're all in it because we really care about our children's development, and we use technology to try and engage some of those harder to reach children. And then there's the good old-fashioned Luddite view. The old way worked just fine for me. We should go back to that. This digital stuff is all rubbish. We're all going to hell in a handcart, which may well have been a common reaction when books and the printed word first came out. Except for now, the digital stuff is free, and it's really accessible, and it's becoming more so. And when you look at it in the context of the bigger historical picture, the digital age seems like a logical next step in spreading teaching and learning in a wider and wider field, in more and more ways, in breadth and in depth. Here's one that has niggled me in the past. Digital material is full of cheap, nasty imagery. And because it is produced by companies who want to make profits, that isn't going to change anytime soon. And children will grow up thinking that that is an okay aesthetic, instead of appreciating a glorious quality illustration. I don't really think that. I think children's aesthetic sense is much more robust. I think they know what is beautiful and what isn't, and they're perfectly capable of making up their own distinction. It's our job to make sure that they have access to beautiful and challenging art as much as possible, so that they have something to measure against or to decide about. Now, I don't know if you are familiar with the American writer, Dave Eggers. He shot to fame with a book called A Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius. And in 1998, he founded McSweeney's Publishers. And in 2002, moved into 826 Valencia, in which McSweeney's was housed. This is the description on their website. Named after our street location in the Mission District of San Francisco, 826 Valencia was founded in 2002 by educator Nineveh Caligari and author Dave Eggers, who were looking for a way to support overburdened teachers and connect talented working adults with the students who could use their help the most. Because our space was zoned for retail, we needed to open a store. After briefly considering a hot dog stand, we looked at the ship-like surfaces of the stripped-down space, a former gym, and decided to open a pirate store instead. Behind the store, we built a writing lab, designed to be a place kids would want to spend time, with a cozy reading tent, big work tables, and lots of books. Word spread quickly, and soon every chair was filled with students working on their writing with our trained tutors. We currently serve over 6,000 students a year, thanks to our core of over 1,700 volunteers. Inspired by the success of 826 Valencia, 6 more 826 chapters have opened in cities across the country. New York, Chicago, Ann Arbor, Los Angeles, Boston, and Washington, D.C. are each home to a unique branch of 826. And you see the building. What a beautiful building. How inviting and enticing, isn't it? You just want to go in. A landmark in the journey of 826, I think, was when they took some of the stories that the children had written and started publishing them in books. The first one was called Talking Back, and it featured the voices of 71 students, really honest pieces of what they thought about teaching and the value of teachers. There have been many more since, but I think the first one was really important and cemented the success because it let the children know that someone was taking them and the work that they produced and cared about so deeply, it was being taken seriously. And of course, that's hugely motivated. The creative arts can work miracles like this, and Dave Eggers knows it more than most, perhaps. His dream is that every creative individual and organisation builds a relationship with the public school so that these transformative journeys can continue. So, we've looked at some models and dreams about how teaching is starting to change. Now let's look a little bit about what we want to be teaching. And of course, the things like core literacy and numeracy, STEM subjects, languages, and so forth are important. But given the truth that's almost a cliche now and was touched on earlier, that there's no way we can know what jobs the children who are now entering our education system will be asked to do when they leave it. Those transferable skills, those competencies are going to become more and more important. I use this piece of research from Kent University in the UK quite a lot, and itself is a collection of other pieces of research. Communication, teamwork, self-motivation, they're always there in these kinds of lists, and I think it's just worth reiterating that these competencies are not an afterthought. They may be spoken about as soft skills, but really they're what reams and reams of hard evidence tells us is needed in the workplace today. But how do you specifically teach, say, drive or flexibility? Well, you can't do it in isolation, of course. But the arts and cultural projects are very great at this. This is a project in a post-16 classroom. We were asked to deliver the maths curriculum through the process of rejuvenating the learning space. And we thought right from the beginning, to be honest, that neither the curriculum nor the learning space were fit for purpose. But this was a special school. And the children in this post-16 unit, I think there were 12 of them, they had very different needs and very different challenges. We started very gently, and we mapped out the space that we were going to work with the children to a 10-to-1 scale. And then we measured the children and made models of them, obviously with the children, so they could see their place in the space. We worked with them. The children developed their own mood boards, the colours that they wanted, in which areas. We worked with them to draw up shopping lists and budgets. And then final, we all went to IKEA to go shopping. And we insisted, we took our budgets and our price lists and our mood boards and everything was it. It was a real event. We had one bus with the children in and another bus to carry home the shopping. We also insisted that every child had a £5 note to buy their own lunch. Even if they needed a bit of support, they could experience normal shop, going with their £5 note, choosing their meal, queuing up, giving in the money, getting their change. And it might not seem like much to you and I, but to these particular children, that was absolutely massive. So during the Easter holidays, myself and my team went in and, we painted the walls and made cushions and that kind of thing with the children. But there were things like Hayfele very kindly donated some kitchen for us, and obviously we couldn't do that with the children. So we needed to kind of finish it off, get the big stuff in, and get all prepared for the big reveal when they came back from the Easter holidays. And when they did, it was a very special day. And again, I think part of the reason that they were so excited, it wasn't just that somebody had come and made their space new. It was that their decisions, their ideas, their work, what they wanted had been taken seriously and had actually come to pass. And they retained the maths learning. This next one, this is an enormous school in the middle of England that has 14 different sites. And again, it's children with all kinds of emotional and behavioural difficulties mostly, and some mental health issues. I should say that I don't work exclusively with children with special needs, but I think it's where some of the major impact is made. So, we used Snow White as a starting point with these children. I mean, I know from the outside it might have just looked like, we're putting on a show, but it was so much more than that. We used Snow White and the archetypes of those 7 dwarfs. So we asked the children in very kind of careful sessions, let's imagine, what would it be like if you were, for example, happy all the time, or if you were bashful all the time, or sneezy all the time? If you were that individual, what would be the impact on the people around you, and what might you aspire to in your later life? There were some very interesting conversations, and of course it was much easier for them to talk about themselves really through the conduit of an external character. So we put together the situation where the show took place in the home for retired dwarves. So all of the dwarves had grown up and they'd gone through transformational journeys and become something else. Bashful, for example, had become Spirit. Some of the children just weren't in a state of happiness, really, to be able to come onto the stage. We had a lot of filmed material that took part, that was a component of the show. We also needed to introduce the children very gently to the surroundings because it was a big deal for them to go out. By the end, they were on stage, they were running the house lights and sound, they were doing absolutely stage management, taking props on and off. There was a huge change for an awful lot of them. Okay, I'll just quickly whiz into sport. Sport gets a little bit of a better deal where we come from. I didn't know, by the way, that up until 1924, the Olympics had arts events in it as well as sport. But this was a project with Year 2 classes in a mainstream infant school. And we asked the children, wouldn't it be fun if we made our own Olympics, but instead of sport, it was learning. And they went, yeah, that would be great. And then they just made it up. So they chose the events, which were like storytelling, phonics, painting, numeracy, handwriting, spelling, tidying up nicely. And the planning skills were incredible, because not only did they decide the areas of competition, but also what the event would consist of, what the criteria for judging would be, how to move the people around on the day. It was absolutely great. The storytelling I really want to quickly tell you about, because there were children in that class who ordinarily would never get up and speak in front of people, but in this context couldn't wait to get up, and even if they hadn't put their name down for the storytelling event, on the day they've got up, can I please, and we had to make space and time for them because it was such a massive leap for them. Okay, yes. So, all of these examples are really about implying metacognitive strategies and the benefits of meaningful feedback, as Neil was talking about earlier. So we struggle a little bit as well as the arts get a bit undervalued, I think, and a lot of schools struggle for these interventions, certainly where I come from. And we also struggle a little bit with the data question. People ask, how can we measure impact of these kinds of projects or these shifts in our pedagogy and learning styles? What we find is that actually the data comes out, it's normal school data, it shows. It doesn't maybe show straight away, but you don't need additional data to prove the impact. It does show up. So, children, my dream for them. My dream is that we have an educational system that utilizes the potential freedoms offered to us by the digital age to create learning systems and environments that respect and continually challenge the capabilities of children in an atmosphere of play and experiment, developing confident, creative humans to build a brighter future. But that's me. And I'm interested also in your dream and what you think your children can do. I know that children can organize an entire Olympic Games. We work within the system, but we can wiggle and push from within it. And we have an army of youngsters who want to come with us, who want to be interested, to help us make school less boring for them and for us. And it should be easy. We've got all this stuff. We've got all this fabulous technology to make our dreams for the digital future come true. We just have to be clear about what it is. So I would like to ask again, for those people who perhaps at the start didn't feel like they had a clear vision for the digital age of the future, how many could identify a single step so that they could move closer to their own dream of what they think education should be? Oh, sorry, I forgot to say, would you use your voting thingies?
Vai visi ir izteikuši savu viedokli? Tad skatāmies, kas mums sanāk.
Oh, I think, is that more than said no at the beginning?
Looks like.
That's good. Yeah, because, you know, I know it's a cliche that every journey starts with a single step, but if you have one idea to how to move towards your dream, of course it's much more likely that it will come true. So I thank you very much for listening to me and hope you enjoy the rest of the forum.
Liels paldies!
What am I doing?